My name is Kyle Cail. Yes, I know the alliteration is terrible, but my parents didn't notice it until the birth certificate was finalized, so I'm stuck with it. But this story isn't about my name. It's about my new job. I recently got a new job as a night guard at an office building. It was right up my alley, so I immediately applied when I saw the job posting. I nailed the interview, and soon enough, I was walking in for my first day on the job. Up to this point, I'd been given a quick rundown of my duties, a tour of the building, and instructions on how to use my taser. I actually already knew exactly how to use a taser, but I wasn't going to let them know for legal reasons. All in all, I felt more than ready to handle this job. I was very wrong. Upon reaching the front desk, where I would be spending a good amount of my time, I found a piece of paper lying on the table. It read, "Important. Instructions for the night security guard." I was going to disregard it, as I had already had all my duties explained to me, but I figured it couldn't hurt, and besides, I had plenty of time, so I sat down and read it. Man, I'm glad I did. Important. Instructions for the night security guard. Rule 1. Lock all the doors and windows before 8 p.m. Rule 2. Do not look into any mirrors. Rule 3. If you see anyone or anything outside the building, ignore them and definitely do not let them in, no matter who they appear to be. Rule 4. Every hour, patrol the main hallways of the first 3 floors. Do not go to floor 4. Rule 5. If you see anything out of place on the security cameras, do not look until it is gone. Rule 6. If you see the rusty doors open on the security cameras, close and lock it as fast as you can, even if it is on floor 4. If something emerges from it before you can do so, hide. Rule 7. If you notice any doors or windows that were not there before, do not open them. Rule 8. If you hear screaming, crying, or especially laughing, do not investigate it. Immediately return to the front desk. Rule 9. If someone comes up to you while you are at the desk and asks you a question regardless of what they asked, direct them to floor 4. Rule 10. If you hear or see something approaching you, run. Do not stop until 6 a.m. I looked at the paper with confusion. Was this a prank? I'd read stories of things like this, but I never thought it'd actually happen in real life. It wouldn't hurt to follow them, though. And if it was a prank, at worst, I'd feel silly, and it would keep me occupied throughout the night. So I decided to follow them. I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. I needed to lock all the doors and windows. Rules or not, I was the security guard, and making sure nothing got in was part of my job. I set off through the building to lock everything. When I finished, I looked at my watch again. 7:52. Good. I had time to spare. I returned to the front desk and started rereading the rules, trying to memorize them. A lot of them didn't make any sense, like running without stopping until 6 a.m. What if that started at midnight or something? Whoever wrote these rules wasn't trying very hard to make them realistic. I looked up as I heard a knocking sound come from in front of me. A small child was standing just outside the glass front door. She was barefoot, wearing pink pajamas and holding a teddy bear. I immediately looked back at Rule 3. If you see anyone or anything outside the building, ignore them and definitely do not let them in, no matter who they appear to be. I looked back up at the door. The girl was trying to open the door. She mouthed, "Let me in" at me. I stopped to think for a moment. If there was a lost child outside, I needed to help her, whatever the rules said. I got up, went to the front door and kneeled down. She pressed her hands against the glass and mouthed, "Let me in again." I mouthed back, "Where are your parents?" She didn't respond but started jumping at the door handle again. Torn, I stood up and went back behind the security desk again, intending to call the police. As I picked up the phone, I noticed something on the security cameras. The camera showing the spot just outside the door was empty. I looked back at the girl. She looked distressed now and was hitting the door with her hands. Thinking the camera could be glitching, I shone my flashlight out the front door. The girl squinted at the light, and I looked at the camera again. The beam of the flashlight was visible, but there was no girl there, and the light showed no shadow. I moved it around a bit to be sure. The girl was getting more agitated now, banging against the door, wanting to cover all my bases just in case. I got a piece of paper, wrote, "I'm calling the police. Go to the McDonald's that way." I drew an arrow, and wait for them, went back to the door, and held the paper up. She looked angry at that. She banged on the door again, visibly upset, jumping up and down. Then I noticed something. Her pajamas were clean. She had no dirt on her bare feet, her hair wasn't messed up despite the wind outside, and even her hair was in perfect condition. She stopped banging on the door and looked me straight in the eyes. She had no irises and there was no reflection in her eyes. I looked closer and found she didn't even have veins. Her eyes were pure white with a black spot in the middle that never changed size and didn't reflect anything. I straightened up and backed away, and the girl gave me the most hateful look I had ever gotten from a child and screamed. Despite her being on the other side of the glass, the scream sounded like it had come from inside. I covered my ears and closed my eyes, and when I opened them, she was gone. My heart pounding, I stumbled back to the desk and sat down, breathing heavily. I was now seriously freaked out, and no longer doubting the list was genuine. I checked my watch. 8. 2. It was time for my patrol. Taking a few deep breaths to calm myself, I got up and headed for the stairs, pulling my taser out as I did so. The first 2 floors were uneventful, and I calmed down a bit. I put my taser back in its holster. I could do this. I wasn't some ordinary person unaccustomed to strange and life-threatening situations. I could do this. My confidence lasted until the 3rd floor, when I heard a loud thumping noise from above. I froze. I reached for the list, only to realize I'd left it on the front desk. Crap. I looked around me, making sure I wasn't being stalked by something. The thumping sound moved away, towards the stairs. Going into full ninja mode, I bent down enough that nothing would be able to see me over the cubicle walls, then quietly ran over to one of the cubicles within view of the stairs and hid inside it, peeking out at the stairway. Within a few seconds, I saw a dark figure emerge onto the 3rd floor from the stairway. It was tall, at least 6 feet, maybe more, and it was vaguely humanoid, although its shape wasn't well defined. I quickly pulled my head back into the cubicle I was hiding in and cursed myself for not bringing my periscope. Yes, I have a periscope. Don't ask why. Quietly, I scooted the office chair out from under the desk just enough that I could fit past it, and crawled under the desk, pulling the chair towards me as much as it would go. I breathed slowly, making as little noise as possible. Straining my ears, I made out a quiet, constant sound that hadn't been there before. It sounded like the wind howling, but so quiet I could barely hear it. The thumping had completely stopped. I heard the howling sound come closer and saw the light out the cubicle doorway getting dimmer. The edge of the shadow creature became visible just past the left of the cubicle doorway. I held my breath and remained perfectly still, making no noise. A few short seconds later, the creature retreated back to the left and the lights brightened again. I heard the howling move slowly to the left and then behind me. The creature was now on the opposite side of the cubicles from me. Quietly but quickly, I moved the chair out of the way and ran carefully back to the stairway in a crouch, thanking God the floor was carpeted. I descended the stairs, cringing at the, albeit quiet, sound they made, and returned to the front desk. Immediately, I grabbed the paper and started reading it again, determined to not let it out of my sight for the rest of my shift. My adrenaline was pumping at this point. I looked at my watch. 8:40. This was going to take forever. I put the rules on the desk and picked up the phone, calling 911. When I put the receiver to my head, all I heard was static. I was about to try again when I heard a deep, demonic voice coming out of the speaker. "Kyle," it said. Heart thumping, I put the phone back down. At this point, I knew I was dealing with something supernatural, so I wasn't taking any chances. Quickly glancing around, I looked back at the list and started reading it again. As I read it, I heard a voice. Startled, I looked up and saw a woman standing in front of the desk, roughly 25 or so, I'd guess. I hadn't heard her approach. "Excuse me," she said. "I don't know where my child went. Can you help me find my child?" I immediately thought back to the little girl outside the door. "Trust me, lady, you don't want to find your child." Regardless, I swallowed, cleared my throat, and said, "Try going to floor 4. We have a place set up there for lost children." I had no idea if that was true or not, never having been to floor 4, and never planning on it. But I wasn't about to break the rules. "Thank you," the woman said, and left, going up the stairs. I noticed I still couldn't hear her footsteps, despite the hard floor. After reviewing the rules yet again, this might seem excessive, but when your life depends on following a list of rules perfectly, you read those rules. I checked the security cameras. On camera 7, on the first floor, I saw another shadow person standing perfectly still, staring at the cameras. This one, however, was shorter and thinner than the last one I saw, and more defined, not blurring out at the edges. Its face was blank, but I got the distinct impression that it had eyes, despite there being no change of color on its face. Remembering Rule 6, I only looked at it for a second and was about to look away when I noticed something else. On camera 14, on the 4th floor, there was a door I hadn't seen before. It was rusty, making it reddish-brown. It was also slowly swinging open. Really? I thought, the door is showing up on the 4th floor on my first night. Not that I planned on working any more than one night if I survived this. Making a split-second decision, I sprang up from my chair, just remembering to grab the rules, and sprinted to the stairs, taking them 2 at a time once I reached them. Why? Why, I thought frantically as I ascended the stairs. Why does this have to happen to me? Why is this happening in the first place? Why does this place exist? Why? As soon as I passed the 3rd floor, I felt a chill. The temperature had to be at least 10 degrees lower here than in the rest of the building. I left the staircase and sprinted to the left, in the direction I hoped the camera looking at the door was. Fortunately, I was correct. And so far, it seemed like nothing had come out of the door. I ran into the doorframe, too scared to slow down before I hit it, and slammed it shut, then locked it. Not forgetting I was on the 4th floor, I immediately turned back and sprinted back to the stairwell as fast as I could. Just as I reached it, I heard what sounded like a child's laughter coming from behind me. My adrenaline spiking, I shot down the stairs, kicking off the wall whenever I had to turn. I probably should have mentioned the staircase was a spiral staircase, so I couldn't just slide down the railing, although I would have done that if I could have. I didn't stop until I made it back to the front desk, the one place I felt somewhat safe. I was slightly winded, but fortunately, I was in very good shape and did a lot of running, so it wasn't too bad. I quickly glanced at the security camera, making sure everything was back to normal. The door had vanished, along with the shadow person. I breathed a sigh of relief and sat down, allowing myself to close my eyes for a few seconds as I calmed down. I looked at my watch again. 9:00. I would have gone out to patrol, but on the way out of the 4th floor, I had heard laughing, so I decided to stay at the front desk. I needed a break anyway. Upon relaxing a bit, I alternated between checking the security cameras and reading the list, which had gotten significantly crumpled from being in my hand during my high-speed mission to close the rusty door. The next few hours passed mostly without incident, although at around 2:00, while I was on my patrol, I saw a decrepit, horrifying woman with black hair and dark eyes grinning at me in the reflection of the window to a dark conference room on the second floor. I quickly turned to see if she was in the room with me, but saw nothing, so I booked it back to the desk. Apparently, any reflective surface counted as a mirror. I quickly made a mental note to turn on all the lights before my next shift, if I had one that was. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, I was exhausted. The last few hours had passed mostly without incident, save for the lights spontaneously going off on the second floor as I was starting my patrol. I heard creepy sounds coming from the darkness, so I bolted back to the stairs and decided to skip the rest of the patrol. A little while later, I decided I should probably finish my patrol. I only had the third floor left, so it shouldn't take too long, though I was still antsy from the lights going off on the second floor, the creepy woman in the mirror, and the shadow monster on the third floor. I made it halfway through the third floor before I heard it, a quick thumping sound coming from behind me. I turned to look and saw a pale, faceless man wearing a blood-stained business suit running at me. Crying out in fear, I turned and ran away, faster than I'd ever run before. I was going even faster than I had when closing the rusty door, as this time I was directly being chased, and I knew that if the man caught me, I would be dead or worse. I sprinted back to the stairs and fled downwards, heading for the ground floor. I vaulted the railing and headed towards the front door until I saw someone outside. It was a homeless man. Remembering what had happened with the child, I turned and ran past the door, footsteps following me. I kept running and running, making loops around the first floor, vaulting over desks and tables, until my energy started to run out. My adrenaline was fading, and I felt exhausted from all the running I had done, not just from the faceless creature, but the whole rest of the night, as well as the adrenaline crash. If I was anyone else, I'd have collapsed of exhaustion a long time ago, to be left at the mercy of whatever monster pursued me. But I kept going. My speed had suffered, and instead of vaulting over tables and desks, I was now running around them. The footsteps came closer, and right as they were about to reach me, I put all my remaining strength into a leap forward, crashing over a desk and knocking it over, whirling around as I landed and firing my taser at my pursuer. He was gone. At first, I thought my taser had made him disappear. Then for a moment, I thought I might be dead. But a few seconds later, I remembered Rule 10 and looked at my watch. 6, 6, 0. I had made it. I had survived my shift. Upon regaining consciousness, I saw sunlight streaming through the windows. The man who had interviewed me the other day, Jim, was standing over me. "Are you okay, son?" he asked. "You look like you've been through a lot." It took me a moment to become lucid enough to remember everything that had happened. When I did, I was filled with rage. "Am I okay?" I shouted. "Of course, I'm not okay. Of course I've been through a lot. Why did you tell me what the heck I was in for before I started my shift?" "I could have died. I did not sign up for this. You should be arrested." I almost tased him. He had taken a few steps back while I was shouting, and stood there looking uncomfortable while I got my breath back. Then he approached me again. "Look, I know you've probably had a very traumatic experience, but I promise, we have good reasons for everything we did." I put my taser back in the holster and stood up. "Then you'd better explain it to me. Quick, quick." He led me to his office. As we went, other employees started trailing in, giving me weird looks. I stared back at them venomously. I probably looked a little disheveled. Jim and I entered his office. He sat down behind his desk and offered me a cup of tea. I sat down on the other side of the desk. "What am I, British?" I said impatiently. "Just tell me what the heck is going on already." Jim held his hands up in a placating gesture. All right, I'm sorry," he said. "I just find that tea helps people calm down after their first night." I started. How many other people had he lured into this death trap? I made to stand up again before Jim spoke. Listen, I know what happened last night was terrible for you, but we don't have a choice. See, this building? It's... He paused, looking for the right word. I guess you could say it's haunted. You've probably noticed. I nodded angrily, gesturing impatiently for him to hurry up. I wasn't here to be told something I already knew. This has been going on for about 2 years, Jim said. It started after the blackout. For about 10 minutes, all the lights in the building went out. All the blinds at the windows closed and the doors locked. It was a cloudy day, so we had almost no light. The doors all locked, too, so we couldn't leave. We heard thunder outside when the lights went out, too. When they came back on, the thunder stopped, and inexplicably, we could open all the doors and blinds. We couldn't open the blinds during the blackout, by the way. Anyway, afterwards, we found that one of our employees, John, was missing. We looked for him everywhere and then called the police, but he was nowhere to be found. He's been missing ever since. After the blackout, the night security guard started reporting strange occurrences, like what I'm sure you saw last night. Apparitions, strange doors, etc. By the time we figured out what to do when these things happened, we had lost 2 guards. Didn't the police become suspicious after 3 people went missing in the same building? I interjected. Of course, Jim replied. But they just chalked it up to gang activity and kept working on other things. I'm sure you've noticed the helpfulness of law enforcement in this city. I snorted. I sure had. Jim continued. So we decided to just stop hiring night guards. Unfortunately, that didn't work. When we did that, the occurrences started happening outside the building, at the nearby houses and businesses, outdoors, even at the homes of some of our employees. The police investigated again, but again they just chalked it up to gang activity or something, and they even suggested that Revenant may be involved. My eyebrows rose. That was one of the reasons I had decided to work in this area. Don't ask. Yeah, it wasn't good, Jim said grimly. So we came up with the rules and showed them to every night guard we interviewed after they passed. All of them but one immediately quit upon finding out how serious we were about them. The one that didn't lasted one night. The police didn't even bother to investigate that one. So that's why we didn't give you the rules until you started. We couldn't risk you leaving. We've had other employees take shifts as night guards, but understandably, none of them were too eager, especially as more people disappeared. So we kept hiring. That's why we were so enthusiastic to hire you. You seem perfect for the job. There was silence for a minute. After hearing the whole story, I felt significantly less angry. How did you figure out the rules? I asked. Trial and error, Jim replied. We looked through some of the security camera footage, as well as listening to what the surviving guards had done to stay alive. The door, for example, was fairly easy to figure out after watching the security footage. Floor 4 was the one John was last seen on during the blackout. The rules are, however, not exhaustive. There's likely some things we haven't encountered or figured out yet. Yeah, I noticed that, I said somewhat flippantly. Jim scooted his chair forward. That reminds me, he asked. What exactly happened on your shift? We've never had a guard end his shift unconscious by an overturned desk with his taser out before. I sighed, took a deep breath, and then started to explain everything that had happened during my shift. Jim was stunned. The door appeared on the 4th floor on your first night. That's never happened before. At least it was on the list, I replied. Well, it explains why you were on the floor unconscious at least. Not the door. Rule 10. I nodded. How exactly did you figure that one out? I asked. Well, it's only ever happened one time, and it was to one of the longer-lasting guards. He got lucky, and the thing only appeared a couple minutes before 6. I have no idea how you managed to survive its pursuit for so long. I work out. Jim laughed, then turned serious again. So, I know this is going to be a lot to ask, but will you be returning? He studied me uncertainly. I stopped to think for a minute. I wanted nothing more than to leave this building and never come back. But then, hearing Jim's story about what happened when the building wasn't occupied at night, and how many others had died, I felt a responsibility to stay, to keep others safe. After all, I was the most likely person in the city, maybe even the world, to safely do this job, and I was reluctant to just pass this dangerous burden on to someone else. But then, I also had other duties to perform in my life, important ones. I couldn't just abandon them. Maybe I could just stay long enough to learn more about how this building operates at night and make it easier for future guards to do their job. Maybe even get to the root of the problem and permanently stop the whole thing. I looked back up at Jim. "I'll stay," I said. "For now. My name is Chris Walden, and I recently got a new job as a night security guard at an office building. Apparently, the last night guard quit after only a couple weeks. They seemed desperate for a replacement, maybe even a little too desperate, but I couldn't argue with the paycheck. When I arrived at the building for my first shift, I found a note sitting on the front desk. It said, "Important. Emergency instructions for the night security guard" at the top in bright red, and was copied onto several pieces of paper. I picked it up and read it. Under the red letters, it said, "Welcome to your first and possibly only shift as the night security guard. This is a list of important rules to follow tonight. It is vital for your safety that you follow these rules exactly. Always keep a copy with you and try to memorize them in your free time. Rule 1. Lock all the doors and windows and turn on all the lights in the building before 8 p.m. at the very latest. I recommend coming in to work early to make sure you get this done in time. Rule 2. Do not look into any mirrors. This includes non-mirror reflective surfaces, such as your phone or windows. I have covered up all the mirrors in the building, but you'll probably have to do that yourself for the next nights. If you're skeptical enough to want to ignore one of the rules, make it this one. You won't want to break them afterwards. Rule 3. If you see anyone or anything outside the building, ignore them and definitely do not let them in, no matter who or what they appear to be. Rule 4. Every hour, patrol the main hallways of the first 3 floors. Do not go to floor 4. I have put yellow tape on the stairs to mark the beginning of floor 4, so you don't accidentally go up there. Rule 5. If you see anything out of place or unusual on the security cameras, turn them off immediately and stay under the desk for at least 2 minutes. Rule 6. If you see a rusty door open on the security cameras, close and lock it as fast as you can, even if it is on floor 4. This overrides Rule 4. If something emerges from the door before you can close it, hide under the front desk. You will know if this happens. On the back of this paper, there will be a map of the building showing the location of each security camera. Memorize this as soon as you can so you'll know exactly where the door is. Rule 7. If you notice any doors or windows that were not there before, do not open them. If they're already open, don't look inside and quickly close them and get away from the area. Rule 8. If you hear screaming, crying, or especially laughing, do not investigate it. Immediately return to the front desk and hide. Rule 9. If someone comes up to you while you are at the desk and asks you a question, regardless of what they asked, direct them to floor 4. The exact words you use aren't important, as long as you get them to go to floor 4. Rule 10. If you hear or see something chasing you, run. Do not stop until 6 a.m. If you don't think you can make it until then, leave the building, get to your car, and leave. Don't go home after this. Go to the McDonald's down the street or some other well-lit public place. Rule 11. Don't try to use your phone. Trust me. Underneath the desk, there is a cardboard box for you to hide under, and a short, silver-edged sword for self-defense. It's more effective than the taser, but do not use it unless you have no other choice. Running is the best defense. Good luck. Kyle. I looked at the paper incredulously. This looked like far too much effort for someone to go to for a prank. I flipped through the other copies. The one on the bottom had a small stain on it that looked like blood. The back of each paper had a full map of the building, just as the rules said. There was even a box and a small silvery sword under the desk. This couldn't be real, right? There had to be another reason the pay was so high and the last guard had quit so soon. My hand's starting to shake a bit from nervousness. I pulled up my phone and looked at it. At first, I saw nothing but my own pale reflection staring back at me. Suddenly, the reflection changed. From my face to a horrifying, demonic creature, which opened its mouth and screamed at me. I dropped my phone, my heart racing. From above me, I heard a scream. I picked up the sword and swallowed nervously. I might not survive this shift. This is a short horror story I wrote in the rules horror genre based upon the idea of what would happen if a smart, capable person was the protagonist of a horror story. I wrote it a while ago, but only decided to post it now. Let me know what you think, and thanks for reading.